Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast, where we want you to thrive in the ministry God has called you to. We truly believe that God's placement has purpose, and we're here for you with encouragement and tools for the journey.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Olson. I cannot believe it, but this is episode 10. And I think back through the summer, and we had so many amazing guests on the podcast throughout the summer. And if you haven't heard the episodes, you can go back wherever you listen to podcasts and check those out. But today I have something on my heart that I wanted to share with everybody. And so I just, got the kids in bed. My husband and I got them to bed, and I came down to my studio here, and I've got my dark chocolate and sparkling strawberry water, and I'm all set to go. And if you know me, you know that that is true. I have my dark chocolate and my sparkling water with me in the studio right now because why not? So I will try to refrain from eating and drinking while I'm talking to you on this podcast, though. So anyways, I just wanted to talk with you about stories. And, something that I've been thinking a lot about lately and asking myself a lot lately is, what story do I want to tell? And so that's what we're going to dive into today on the Overflow Worship Podcast. So I want to start with a story. Back when Overflow Worship started, it started as a conference. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go back and listen to episode 1, which kind of gives the whole background story of this ministry and how it came to be, where it started, and all of that. But I started the Overflow Worship Conference just out of a passion in my heart for the church and for equipping worship leaders and teams. And that first year was very tough. It was just a huge stretch to my faith and to my trust. And I really was asking a lot of questions about, God, am I really hearing your voice? Do I really know the sound of your voice? But I was also being stretched in areas that I had never been stretched before, especially when it came to taking big leaps of faith. And for me at that point, these were huge leaps of faith because I felt like they were some of the biggest decisions that I had made because it felt like it depended on me. And it felt like the success of the conference or the failure of the conference depended on me. And obviously, we know that that's not true, but when we're in those moments and we're in those situations, it's really hard not to let our minds go there, at least for me anyway. And so there is something that happened back during that first conference that has really shaped the way that I have viewed things from that point forward. And it's been one of those pivotal moments in my story that I will always remember. And it had to do with lunches. And so the story itself may seem a little bit silly and may seem trivial, but it was so monumental in my life because it was a picture of God's faithfulness, but also a step of faith for me. And it answered the question, what story do I want to tell? And so I'll give a little bit of backstory. I was planning the first Overflow Worship Conference, and I was pregnant with our second daughter and very stressed out about all the logistics. Honestly, I look back and I don't even know how I made it through that event because I didn't really know what I was doing. But God was so gracious, and He brought people to come alongside of me to encourage me and say, "You're doing a great job, and how can I help you?" And all of the things that wonderful friends and family do. And I was planning for, how many people are going to be at this conference. So trying to project numbers, and I felt like I just believed with all of my heart that there was going to be 250 people at this first conference. And so I was praying into that. I was circling that in prayer and just believing, God, you are going to bring these people. I know that you are. And so it came to the point where, the first conference was in the end of July, 2014. And so it came to the point where I had to talk to catering about how many lunches I needed to buy for the conference. And at that point, the conference was like 3 weeks away. And we had about 40 or 50 people registered. And at that point, I was just like, God can do a miracle. There is nothing my God cannot do. But there was also this just fear inside of me that said, okay, what if people don't come? And then I purchase these 250 lunches at, $5 a piece, and I have to pay for them. So I'm responsible for this money, if we don't sell the tickets. And, I was talking with my husband about it, and I was just a mess. And maybe part of it was the pregnancy hormones. I guess I'm not really sure. But I was just a wreck, so stressed about it. God, what should I do? Asking my husband, what should we do about this? I don't know what to tell the caterer. Should I buy 40 lunches, or, should I buy 100 or 250? I really believe that, we're supposed to have 250 people at the conference. And he looked at me and he said, well, what story do you want to tell? When you get to the other side of this conference, do you want to say that you swung for the fences? Or do you want to say that you played it safe? And I was just like, okay. I want to swing for the fences. And so I did. I went and I ordered 250 lunches for that first conference. And, I sowed that seed in faith. And we got to the day of the conference, and we did not have 250 people there. We had about 60 to 75. And, looking back, I know that that's what I could handle. God gave me what I was ready for. And I am so grateful for his grace in that. But the piece of that story that has been so huge for me is that I had to learn that I'm called to be faithful with what God puts in my heart, and the outcome is not up to me. So I'm not responsible for the outcome because I did everything that I knew to do. I called every church that I could possibly think of to call to get people to come and invite them and tell them, we want to see you there. And I worked my tail off for months getting ready for this. And I prayed into it and, just all the things that I really felt like the Lord wanted me to do. And I really believe that he put that number on my heart and that he led me to take that leap of faith. And if it was for no other reason than for me to learn to trust him and learn to say like, hey, look, the outcome's not up to you. It doesn't matter. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility, Andrea. It's God's bigger picture that I don't see. But I had to be willing to ask the question, what story do I want to tell? Do I want to say that I stepped out in faith and just left the rest up to God? Or do I want to say that I was, too scared and I just decided to, I guess, play it safe? And so that was such a pivotal moment in my story. And like I said, it seems silly. And you might be asking, like, what did she do with 200 lunches? And the beautiful part of this story is that there was a ministry within the hosting church that needed those. They were able to use them the next day. So they had refrigerator space in the church. And so we put them all in the fridge. They were just like bag lunches. And there was a ministry that was able to use them for feeding their entire church service for this ministry. And it was like, I don't know if God did that so that he could bless this other ministry, and I had to be willing to just be a vessel and be used. That could have been a huge part of it. And the other part of it was the lesson that I needed to learn of just trust. The outcome is not up to me. I have to be willing to trust my God who is big enough to take care of it. And it might not come out the way that I think or that I want, but it's going to be, what I need. And it's going to be a piece of the bigger story that, of course, I don't see. And I'm grateful that I don't see the bigger picture sometimes because I feel like it would overwhelm me. I don't know if any of you feel that way, but I do. I feel like it would overwhelm me. So I just want to ask you today, what story do you want to tell? So what are you facing in your life right now? What situation, what trial, what struggle, what joy, what pain? What are you facing right now that you know that there's action that needs to be taken? There's a step that needs to be taken, and you're not sure what to do. Well, what story do you want to tell? Do you want to say that you leaned into God and you pressed into what he had for you and what he's doing? Or do you want to play it safe? And I don't want you to take this out of context. So what I'm saying that we need to let our roots grow down deep into him, press into what he's doing, press into what he's saying. And what that means when I say press in is just run after him, seek after him, read the scriptures, spend time in prayer, spend time in worship, do whatever you need to do to get into his presence and to get close to him. And then just listen. I'm reading this book right now called Whisper by Mark Batterson. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And if you say you don't have time for reading, then get the audiobook, because actually sometimes listening it just opens up a whole different realm of perspective, at least for me anyway. And so sometimes I gain more as long as I'm actually attentive. I gain more from listening to it than sitting down and actually reading it some of the time. So anyway, Whisper by Mark Batterson, a great book. And he talks about a whisper spot, that expectant spot where you go and you sit and you spend time with the Lord and you ask him, okay, God, I am listening. I'm putting away all my distractions. Everything else goes away right now. And I am only here to listen to you. And that was convicting for me because I was like, I don't do that. When I go to pray right now in this busy season of my life, I've got an agenda. I've got a long list of things to pray for, and then I got to go to bed so I can get up and do it all over again. And I haven't been taking that time to sit. And so over the last month or so, I've really been taking that time to just sit and listen. And it's hard. My brain is going and spinning, and I'm, thinking about all the things that I could do for the Lord, and maybe he wants me to do this and this and that. But that's not the point. The point is sitting and just being there, expectant. Sometimes we can sit, but not listen, right? We need to sit and listen and actually actively press in and actively lean in to the voice of the Lord and say, what are you saying to me?
Before we continue today's episode, we'd like to invite you to the Overflow Worship Conference on October 11th and 12th in Wilmer, Minnesota. This unique event is for worship leaders and their whole worship team. We focus on small and medium-sized churches and the unique challenges that they face. This year, join Meredith Andrews, Todd Fields, Jacob Suter, Andrea Olson, and more for a weekend of encouragement and growth. For more information, visit overflowworship.com.
So then, as you sit and listen, maybe he's going to call you into something new, or maybe he's going to say, I want you to fill in the blank. I want you to step into this calling. I want you to, walk away from this relationship or pursue this relationship or whatever the case may be. But then the question is, what story do you want to tell? Do you want to get to the other side and say, Lord, I know that I listened to you. I know that I did what you asked me to do, and it maybe didn't turn out exactly the way I thought, or maybe it did. But I know that it's just a piece of the bigger story that you're writing. Because he's writing our story. Every one of us, he's still writing it. He's not done. I've said this before. If you've listened to the podcast faithfully over the last 10 episodes, you've heard me say it before, but he's not done writing your story. And so I just challenge you and encourage you today to really think about that. God, what are you doing in my heart? What are you calling me to step into? What are you stirring in my heart? What do you want to say? Because I want to listen. And then what are you going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? I believe so strongly that the church is on the verge of something new, just like a geyser, for lack of better words, springing up in the church, and that's his spirit. And I believe so strongly that he wants to do something new in his church, and that he wants to bring revival to worship and to hearts and to the places that are tired and worn out. And he wants to bring new life to that. And I believe that it takes us as believers, us as, for those of you who listen who are in worship ministry, you're worship leaders, you're on the worship team, or maybe you're a pastor, it takes the leaders taking the first step and really digging in and saying, okay, God, what are you saying? And how can I be a part of what you're doing? And, the theme for the conference this year, coming up in October, but really for my life this year, is Colossians 2:7. And it says, let your roots grow down into him and let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness. And I love that because it's such a beautiful picture and such a wonderful challenge for us to lean in and listen and let our roots grow down deep. So that means reading scripture and spending time in prayer. All those things I already said are going to deepen your roots so that our lives are built on him. And so that we're aware of what he's saying in his presence all the time. And, then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught. So those things that we say yes to and those things that we press into and say, okay, God, I'm going to step into this and I'm going to have faith because I know that you only speak truth. You only speak truth. So I know that I can trust whatever you say. It might not turn out the way I thought. I might have 200 lunches left over when this is all said and done, but I am overflowing with thankfulness. I tell you what, I'm so grateful for that story in my life. And I am definitely not saying that I do everything right, because I certainly don't. This is not like, hey, look what Andrea did. This is just a story of my life. This is a pillar in my life where God taught me something big, and it definitely didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. It was kind of a bummer in the moment, but I also know that it's exactly what I needed. And now I'm overflowing with thankfulness that he walked me through that and taught me so much. And so that's the question that I leave you with today. What story do you want to tell? And are you going to do the work to let your roots grow down into him? And just remember that he is faithful. He only tells the truth. So whatever he says is true. And I guarantee you, as you walk out this story and as you seek him and seek his story for your life, no matter what twists and turns and twirls it takes you on, you're going to be overflowing with thankfulness because it's his story for you. It's not ours. It's not what we want. It's not, fabricated by us. It's orchestrated by him.
Thank you for listening to the Overflow Worship Podcast. To stay up to date, please subscribe for the latest episodes and information. To learn more about the ministry of Overflow, visit overflowworship.com. If you have questions or prayer requests, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@overflowworship.com.